Yeah. Jesse the bird. You know I won't forget about that bird, right?
Yeah, I know.
And when I said, oh yeah, she is it? And you were like, yeah. And I said, oh yeah, what's her name? And you were like, Jessie. And I was just like, oh.
Jesse Warner. Oh.
Yeah. I remember when I asked, oh, Jessie, eh? And then you're like, first thing came to my mind was, you know, Big Jess. But I thought, oh wait a minute, no, this Jessie's a girl, so it would be spelt Jessie, right?
Same
Instead
thing.
of JSSE.
Yeah.
I miss Jessie. I'm never gonna forget him. By the way, you want to know what Master Splinter from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was inspired by?
What?
The Rat Man of the South End.
Okay.
It's a folklore.
I heard about it.
Not folklore, urban legend, most likely. So there's been two sides to the story about the Rat Man of the South End. You want to hear the first one?
What?
So, first off, right, there was a homeless man, right? You know, an old homeless man. And he, you know, didn't walk that well, and plus it was a very cold night, and the only thing he had in his possession was a blanket. Right? So he went into the Queensway underpass, right? You ever heard of the Queensway underpass?
No.
Alright, it's like a tunnel, right, that goes under the road. And that's why it's called an underpass. And it's called the Queensway underpass, because it's on a road called Queensway, right? Now, a homeless man decided to take some shelter under there, right, in possession with his blanket and whatnot. Sure enough, later on, a group of drunk teenagers came over to him. They saw the homeless man, and instead of like giving him change or anything, you know what they did?
God's sakes, Blake.
Oh, fuck's sakes.
I'll fix in the morning, Dane.
Yeah. So, you know what those drunken teenagers did? They bashed him.
I knew that's going to happen.
Yeah, bashed him, stomped on him, everything. And they even took his blanket. And he was bleeding out to death. And he died because he froze. He died because he froze to death. Died of hypothermia. Yep. And get this. Just like right after he died, right, a whole batch of rats inside the Queensway underpass saw the man's body, right?
Did they eat him?
Yep. They tucked away on him. They were eating him that much, his entire face was eaten off.
Yeesh.
Yep, his face, everything. He died due to blood loss and hypothermia. right? And then rats came out, they ate him, and then the next day they found a dead body in the Queensway underpass of a dead homeless man. And get this, there's been reported sightings, right, of the Rat Man. They called it the Rat Man because he was eaten away by rats. He was homeless, you know, living in a tunnel. And there's been reported sightings that apparently that if you go into the tunnel, you'll hear like rat squealing noises, even scratching noises, and snarl noises. And at the end of the tunnel, they would see the Rat Man himself, right? But his face was completely gone, like just a skeleton-looking face, right?
Spoopy.
Yeah, like when his face was eaten off by the rats. They even stated that, you know, he would curse you if you don't drop any money on the floor. Right?
What's the curse?
Don't know. Don't want to know.
What he turned into a rat?
I don't know. Again. So yeah, and he would show up, and there was even one part where he completely showed up as a half man, half rat. So basically, he had the face and hands of a rat, an absolute rat, right?
Yep.
And they say that his ghost haunts that Queensway underpass. Now, onto the second story about the Rat Man. Now, there was a mayor, right? I forgot his name. He was the mayor of, you know, Southend, mayor of the Southend, right? He was very known for being around, and also he had he slept with loads of women, right?
Typical.
Yep, slept with them. And eventually his fidelity caught up to him. Right?
Fidelity?
Yeah, infertility, whatever, you know, like, basically it's fertilization, if you get what I mean.
No.
Yeah, anyway, and one of his lady friends fell pregnant. And after giving birth, the baby had a very grotesque, long snout, bit of hair, claws, gave birth to a rat. Half baby, human baby, half rat.
Okay.
And what happened is that there was like the mayor wanted to lock it up, and get this, the mayor's, like, you know, house or town, whatever it is, little, you know, little parliament, whatever thing is they call it, was right next to the Queensway underpass, and it's believed that there are tunnels that are linked to the Queensway underpass. So as soon as the mayor locked the half man, half rat thing in one of the cells, right, the tunnels, right, it grew in size, right, to a full human figure, right, but it was like fully rat, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they say that they also say that rat must have escaped into the Queensway underpass.
So that's where the sightings are.
Yep. The Queensway underpass. They call it the Ratman of the South End. I'll play a story to you.
Alright.
Now, this guy, I watched some of his creepy stories. Not gonna lie, some of his stories send shivers down my spine. Here we go. Fucking ads. Alright, here it is.
Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here. If you've watched my videos for any length of time, you'll know that I'm a big fan of creepy folklore stories, and this is a completely new one on me. Someone on Instagram called Nate told me about it. It's quite a modern story. Maybe it's more of an urban legend than a folklore. The legend of the Ratman takes place in Southend-on-Sea, down on the south.
Say again?
Sounds like Mr. Burns.
But British. Yeah. Anyway,
East coast of England.
we'll go.
Takes place in Southend-on-Sea, down on the southeast coast of England. More specifically, a certain tunnel on the Queensway underpass. Nate, the person who told me about this story, actually offered to go and get some footage for me, but to be honest, I didn't like the idea of someone potentially getting stabbed just to get me some footage of a tunnel. I don't know how stabby that area is, and I'm not trying to disparage Southend with that comment, but I read a few things online saying that that tunnel can be a bit dodgy, so we're going to have to make do with the scant few photographs that I was able to find online. Now, there's a couple of stories about the origins of the Ratman. The most gruesome one I've heard is about an unnamed homeless man who lived in the area. He was quite old and had difficulty walking. One winter's night, he entered that particular subway tunnel and took shelter, wrapping himself in his only possession, his blanket. That same night, a group of drunken teenagers came through the tunnel and saw the homeless man. In their drunken state, they decided to beat up the homeless man. They kicked and stomped him until he was unconscious, and then they stole his blanket. Lying there in the subway, battered and bleeding, the old man eventually froze to death. And then the rats came. Maybe they were attracted by the pools of blood on the floor, but they began to eat his body. When his body was found the next day, his face had been completely eaten away. And as the legend goes, his ghost still haunts that very tunnel. In some stories, you might enter the tunnel at night and see an old man shuffling along the underpass ahead of you, and then he'll turn around and you'll see that he has no face. In some versions of the story, he'll then curse you unless you drop money on the floor. Other people say that you'll enter the tunnel and you'll be completely alone in there, but then you'll hear a scuttling, scraping, a squeaking noise, like rats coming towards you, and then the Ratman will emerge, the homeless man now twisted into some sort of half-human, half-rat creature. Now, I've never been able to find a date for when this supposed homeless man was killed, nor have I found a date for the following story, the other version of the Ratman origin. Some say the mayor of the town was known as a bit of an adulterer. He had many women around the town that he would visit. Eventually, his infidelity caught up with him, and one of his lady friends fell pregnant. What she gave birth to was a grotesque, deformed baby. It had a long, rat-like face, long claws, and a tail. In an effort to get rid of the child, the mayor had secret tunnels built under the ground near his house, and in these tunnels was a cell in which the boy was kept. But apparently the child escaped, and now he roams the Queensway underpass. And if you look on a map, right next to the Queensway underpass is the Porter's Civic House and Mayor's Parlour. I guess it's plausible there could be tunnels under there that link up to the Queensway underpass. Nate says that there's recently been spray paintings of rats and stuff down there, and he just generally gets a bad vibe from the area. He said he's been looking into it and there's been some interesting sightings of the Ratman in the underpass. I haven't managed to find too much online. I was having a look. Most of the stories I can find are of people saying when they were kids they would dare each other to run into the tunnel. Some of them would shout Ratman. I found one post on a forum from 2009 that said that someone was in that particular underpass. It was dark and there was nobody else around, and they heard a strange noise behind them. They say it was a mix between a gurgle and a hiss. It then turned into a hideous snarl that sounded almost human. They ran out of the tunnel and that was the end of their encounter. I don't know about the story. It's a bit wordy. It kind of makes it sound like they're just trying to write a creepypasta rather than telling a genuine tale. But I don't want to be too judgmental. Maybe they did encounter the Ratman, but that's the only real encounter that I've been able to find whilst I've been looking into it.
Fuck off. Listening to the story though?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah. Creepy.
Now, often on these folklore videos, I do like to look at similar legends from around the world. There are a number of creepy tunnel stories that have...
If you want, yeah. Also, like, when you watch the video, right, you'll see, like, pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty creepy.
I'd rather listen to them instead.
Yeah, anyway.
Echoes of this sort of legend. The closest I can find is Ernest Junction Tunnel, which is in Australia. Now, this used to be a train tunnel, and eventually the line was closed, and now it's just a creepy abandoned tunnel. It's covered in graffiti, and there's stories of devil worshippers going in there to perform strange rituals. But there is a tale of a homeless man who used to sleep in there, who was stabbed to death one night, and his ghost still haunts the tunnel. And there's another legend about a little boy that haunts the tunnel. There isn't much more information about this particular ghost, but I don't know, I found it interesting that there's another story about a creepy tunnel that's haunted by a homeless person and the ghost of a child.
Say again?
I sent the coordinates to our chat just in case we get lost or something.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of trying to find a spruce
Tunnel.
forest.
Anyway.
Wanna come?
Yeah, I'll come with you in a minute.
Similar to how there's two different legends about the Ratman Tunnel. There is another tunnel that has a story about a homeless man and a child. This is Sensabaugh Tunnel in Tennessee. A man named Edward Sensabaugh owned the lands that this tunnel went through. Now, I don't know if this story is true, but apparently one night Edward let a homeless man stay in his house. That night, the homeless man tried to steal some jewellery, so Edward confronted him with a gun. The homeless man grabbed Edward's baby daughter and used her as a human shield and ran out the house. He took the baby into the tunnel and drowned her. Now, people say that if you go into the tunnel and stand there in silence, you'll hear the sound of a baby crying, followed by heavy footsteps as if a grown man is approaching. There's even similar stories in the virtual.
Yeah, well, now he's bringing up, you know, anyway, hear this.
World. Grand Theft Auto 4 is a good example. Now, I remember the game having loads of strange urban legends. Some people have claimed that while they were exploring the tunnels under Liberty City, they encountered a strange creature who they dubbed the Ratman. Similar to the Ratman of Southend, the Ratman in GTA 4 is either said to appear as a regular hobo who can run abnormally quickly and stays out of sight, or he appears as a half-human, half-rat creature. People have searched for this Ratman in the game's code, and as far as I can tell, they haven't found anything conclusive. Once again, we have the legend of a creepy tunnel and the homeless Ratman. And I can kind of see how these legends might occur organically. These tunnels and underpasses often have an eerie feeling to them, especially at night, so it's natural that strange, creepy tales can emerge around these places. In some ways, the Ratman tale is a take on the classic vengeful ghost story. It also has echoes of something like the Candyman, especially with kids daring each other to shout the Ratman's name as if they were going to summon him. But who knows, maybe there really is a Ratman in Queensway Underpass. So once again, thank you to Nate for introducing me to this legend. I really enjoyed looking into this. I love weird British folklore, so yeah, this was right up my street. Thank you for watching, and a big thanks to everyone on Patreon for supporting the channel. Until next time, goodbye.
So what do you think of that story?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to know the person's channel?
Yeah.
It's called Shrouded Hand. I'll send you a link to it.
Yeah, probably best. I think I know where to go. I think the place is this way. West.
Give me a minute. Yep. So it's called the Queensway Underpass.
Alright.
The Queensway Underpass. I looked it up on Google.
Alright.
Yeah. Scary story.
West.
Yeah. So.
I should get myself a shield. Just in case some skellies want to annoy me.
It's in peaceful mode.
Ah. I'm gonna put on, you know.
You want to know? Yeah. You want to know how Freddy Krueger was inspired by?
Mm-hmm.
It's called the sleep paralysis demon.
Ah, I know that.
Yeah. So here's how the story went. Shrouded Hand.
Something the enemy does not. Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here.
It's only
Today I'm
adventure
going to
while
look at
that's
the
playing.
real-life inspiration for one of my favourite horror films, A Nightmare on Elm Street. This video is part of a collaboration with the Proper Horror Show channel. If you watch my Ghost Watch video, you'll know how this works. I or some other creator investigates the real-life stories behind famous horror movies. Then on Horror Show's channel, we discuss the movie itself in a long-form podcast sort of thing. It's an interesting idea, and I was glad to be asked to do another one because I really do love this film, and I was happy to be given an excuse to talk about it. So, without further ado, let's dive into the real horror behind A Nightmare on Elm Street. For an American movie about a demonic dream janitor, the true story has a pretty surprising origin: Laos and the Cambodian killing fields. Between 1975 and 1979, the communist Khmer Rouge regime, led by Pol Pot, committed one of the worst atrocities in human history. The Khmer Rouge attempted to create a communist agrarian society and forcibly relocated millions migrated people to the countryside and forced them to work on collective farms. This led to famine, disease, death. Mass executions, torture, and violence were used to maintain control and eliminate enemies. An estimated 1.7 to 2.2 million people died as a result. Meanwhile, in neighbouring Laos, the Pathet Lao, another communist party who shared similar goals to the Khmer Rouge, also took power, again leading to mass incarceration, torture, and death. Many of those persecuted were the Hmong people who had fought for the US-backed Laotian government during the Vietnam War. When the Pathet Lao took power, the Hmong people were targeted because they were seen as having aided the enemy. As you can imagine, life under such terrible regimes would have done some serious psychological damage, so it didn't seem too out of place when refugees escaping to America started having terrible nightmares. These nightmares were particularly prevalent among the Hmong refugees. They claimed an evil presence known as the Da Cho would appear to them when they fell asleep. In an interview, one Laotian man would later describe his encounter with the Da Cho. First, I was surprised, but right away I got real scared. I was lying in bed. I was so tired because I was working very hard then. I wanted to go to school, but I had no money. I kept waking up because I was thinking so much about my problems. I heard a noise, but when I tried, I could not move. My bedroom looked the same, but I could see in the corner a dark shape was coming to me. It came to the bed, over my feet, my legs. It was very heavy, like a heavy weight over my whole body, my legs, my chest.
Fucking hell, what?
The main indication of the main indication that you're having a paralysis demon encounter is you can't even move.
Right.
When you thought that you woke up, but you're still in a dream.
Right. Anyway.
Yep. Just to let you know that.
My chest was frozen like I was drowning. I had no air. I tried to yell so someone sleeping very close to me will hear. I tried moving and using a force that I can, a strength that I can have. I thought, what if I die? After a long time it went away. It just left. I got up and turned on all the lights. I was afraid to sleep again. The Da Cho does sound very much like your typical sleep paralysis experience. During sleep paralysis, a sleeper awakes to find that they cannot move their body. Then they become aware of a shadowy figure in the room with them. The figure slowly moves towards the bed before climbing on top of the body, inducing a suffocating, smothering sensation. This phenomenon of sleep paralysis appears to be ubiquitous across cultures worldwide. As such, the entity encountered during sleep paralysis is known by many names. The Old Hag is her English name. In Thailand, she's known as Phi Am. In Turkey, they have the Karabasan, the Dark Presser. In the Philippines, she's known as Batibat or Bangangot. Whatever the culture, the details are surprisingly similar. A dark-looking entity climbs on top of the sleeper and suffocates them. I personally have only ever encountered the Old Hag once, at least as far as I can remember. I was probably around 19 and I was going out with this girl, and her house always gave me this weird, eerie feeling. It's hard to describe, it just felt strange whenever I was there. Often when I was sleeping over, I would have really weird dreams, and I remember her telling me that she'd once dreamt of a shadow being coming into the room and trying to drag her out of bed by her feet. Anyway, my sleep paralysis experience didn't involve the usual waking up scenario. I was in the middle of a regular dream, and I suddenly felt a weight on top of me as if someone was lying across me sideways, pushing the weight of their own torso down onto my face. It felt very deliberate theft and malevolence. I couldn't move a muscle and I couldn't breathe. I must have been gasping for breath and struggling because it woke my girlfriend up. She reached over and shook my arm, and as soon as she touched me, it sort of snapped me out of it and I woke up. There was nothing covering my face that was causing me to choke. It was purely the result of this extremely vivid dream. And essentially, that was my perception of sleep paralysis. A mere reverie, a figment of the imagination. Although disconcerting, it posed no real threat. It was just a dream after all. But here's the strange thing about the Hmong refugees. What started out as simple nightmares became more and more vivid and terrifying. A number of them claimed to be frightened of falling asleep in case the Dacho got them. And then it seems she did get them. People started dying in their sleep. Heartbroken family members are recounted witnessing their loved ones gasping and writhing in their beds, desperately struggling for breath. Whilst a few were fortunate enough to be awoken by a caring companion, many were not so lucky, and their lives were tragically cut short. According to this news article, the first documented case apparently occurred in Orange County in 1977 when a healthy young man named Lee Dower died in his sleep. Joanne Gill, then a county social worker, recalls the death because she knew Lee Dower so well. There was an autopsy which put down the cause of death as acute cardiac insufficiency. That's a fancy way of saying they didn't know exactly what killed him, she said. As more of these refugees started dying in their sleep, people noticed the pattern, and stories about these mysterious killer nightmares started hitting the headlines. It was these news reports that would inspire a young Wes Craven to create one of cinema's most iconic monsters. In an interview he said, "It was a series of articles in the LA Times, 3 small articles about men from Southeast Asia who were from immigrant families and who had died in the middle of nightmares. And the paper never correlated them, never said, hey, we've had another story like this." The third one was the son of a physician. He was about 21. I've subsequently found out that this is a phenomenon in Laos, Cambodia. Everyone in his family said almost exactly these lines. "You must sleep." He said, "No, you don't understand. I've had nightmares before. This is different." He was given sleeping pills and told to take them, and supposedly he did, but he stayed up. I forget what the total days he stayed up was, but it was a phenomenal amount. Something like 6-7 days. Finally, he was watching television with his family and fell asleep on the couch, and everybody said, "Thank God." They literally carried him upstairs to bed. He was completely exhausted. Everybody went to bed thinking it was all over. In the middle of the night, they heard screams and crashing. They ran into the room, and by the time they got to him, he was dead. They had an autopsy performed, and there was no heart attack. He had just died for unexplained reasons. They found in his closet a Mr. Coffee maker full of hot coffee that he had used to keep awake. They also found all of his sleeping pills that they thought he had taken. He'd spit them back out and hidden them. It struck me as such an incredibly dramatic story that I was intrigued by it for a year at least, before finally I thought I should write something down about this kind of situation. It's interesting, if you're familiar with A Nightmare on Elm Street, how much of that story Craven managed to put on the screen. There has been 117 of these kinds of unexplained deaths reported among the Hmong refugee population in America. In all but one of the cases, they were young men with no pre-existing medical conditions that could have caused a sudden death. In one case, a man was rushed to hospital and successfully revived. It was found that he was experiencing ventricular fibrillation. As one doctor put it, the heart muscle was contracting without affecting normal beats, just sort of quivering. Doctors found no sign of any cardiac disease typically associated with heart attacks, so what was the cause? There was a widespread belief among the refugees that the nerve gas used on them during the Vietnam War was the cause of the nightmares and the deaths. This theory was dismissed by medical professionals who questioned why it would have such a delayed effect and only affect young men when thousands of people, men and women, young and old, had all been exposed to the gas. Another popular belief among the Hmong people was that they'd left their ancestor spirits behind in Laos and were unprotected from spiritual attacks. This left them vulnerable and allowed the Da Cho to attack them in their sleep. These nightmare deaths don't just affect the Hmong refugees, though. There are similar reports from other communities. In Japan, the phenomenon is known as Pokuri death syndrome. In Thailand, it's called Lai Tai, and in the Philippines, it's known as Bangungut. Same as the Hmong refugees, Pokuri, Lai Tai, and Bangungut seem to mainly affect young men. They die suddenly in their sleep for no obvious reason, and it appears to be associated with nightmares and sleep paralysis. The scientific community have named this phenomena SUNS, Sudden Unexpected Nocturnal Death Syndrome, but it seems that they still don't know why it happens or how to prevent it. Calling it Sudden Unexpected Nocturnal Death Syndrome is just a way of lumping together a series of unexplained deaths. It doesn't provide us with any real answers. The fact that it only seems to happen in Asian communities suggests that it could be what is known as a culture-bound syndrome, a pattern of mental illness and abnormal behavior that is unique to a specific ethnic or cultural population and does not conform to any standard classifications of psychiatric disorders. I don't know about you, but that seems like another way of saying they don't know. Others have suggested that it could be caused by certain diets. Consuming excessive amounts of fish sauce have been posited as a factor. There are some articles that suggest this, again though nothing conclusive has ever been proven. As it stands, nobody really knows what causes these nocturnal deaths, so I guess the dream demon hypothesis is still on the table. To be honest, recalling my own sleep paralysis experience, I can't imagine how people might choke to death or their hearts might stop during such an experience. I remember really feeling like I was gasping for breath. Perhaps this causes more deaths than we realize. Maybe people die suddenly in their sleep and we just don't make the link between the old hag and these mysterious deaths.
Found it.
And so that's part of what inspired Freddy Krueger. There were other influences that Wes Craven drew on, certain life experiences that inspired Freddy's appearance. We talk more about that sort of thing in Proper Horror Shows video. I just wanted to look at the dream demon aspect in my own video, so if you want to know more, go watch the talk that we had on Horror Shows channel. Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my all-time favourite movies. I've seen it dozens of times, so I really enjoyed talking about it. But I actually don't know that much about the director, Wes Craven. Luckily, Horror Show is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to that sort of thing, so I learned a lot of interesting stuff, and I think we had a really good discussion. So go check that out. I'll put a link at the end of the video, and I'll put a link in the description, and wherever else I can put a link. Thank you for watching, and a big thanks to the patrons who are helping to keep the channel going.
Oh, no.
It's much appreciated. Until next time, goodbye.
So what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's not bad. Alright,
The Wellington Park gnome encounter. What?
let's not listen to it anymore, okay?
Never heard of the gnome encounter. Might play that in a minute.
Jump
Sleep
for
for-
soft ice. Oh, soft snow.
Yeah. I don't know why, but I don't even believe in the fucking sleep paralysis demon.
What if it happens to you?
well, I'll fucking fight it. I don't give a shit. Won't fucking scare me. I'm 6'6". Nobody ain't taking this fucking stubborn motherfucker down.
Never know.
Fucking Garcho.
I wish the snow on PC does what this snow is doing. Like this.
Yeah. So yeah, Garcho.
Is there any stories about the dope man?
I'll look that up.
Alright.
Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here. Every now and then I like to look at a strange tale from Britain's past. The hairy hands of Dartmoor, the sundown clown, the lantern man. Today's tale is somewhat unique in that it didn't happen on some windswept moor or remote marshland, but in the grounds of a stately hall in the city of Nottingham.
Emeralds.
Oh yeah.
Mulliton Hall is a giant Elizabethan mansion house completed in 1588 for Sir Francis Willoughby, the 6th Baron of Middleton. Thank you, Wikipedia. You might have seen it before in the movie The Dark Knight Rises, where it was used for exterior shots of Wayne Manor. And it's not actually the mansion house itself we're concerned with, but the grounds surrounding it, a 500-acre gardens and deer park. The event in question happened late one evening on the 23rd of September 1979. A group of 6 school children had entered Wallerton Park looking for mischief and adventure. Although most of the park is open to the public, there are certain areas that are fenced off for conservation reasons. One of these areas the children referred to as the swamps, a boggy wild patch covered in thick bushes and trees. According to the children, as they were passing the swamps, they spotted behind the fence a number of little men hiding in the bushes. These men were described as being very short, about as tall as the children's waists. They had long beards, brightly coloured clothes, and the classic gnome-like noddy hats. One of these little men came out of a hole in the fence and made an odd jiggling gesture towards the children before disappearing back into the bushes. The children then saw more of these little men up in the trees, looking down and laughing at them. Intrigued by the appearance of these strange men, the children climbed over the fence and entered the swamps. As they got closer, the little men retreated from view, disappearing into the foliage. Then a whole host of strange vehicles came out of the bushes. They were described by the children as looking like tiny bubble cars with strange triangular lights and some kind of handle for turning. In each car was 2 of these little men. These cars chased the children through the swamps, laughing the whole time as if it was a game. One of the children, Andrew, fell into the swamp head first and got covered with mud. The children ran out of the swamp area, but the gnome cars kept chasing them until they reached the park entrance. The children found that the gate was locked, so you can imagine their panic as they tried to climb over the fence. Then one of the children managed to get the gate open, so they quickly ran out onto the streets. The gnomes stayed inside the park. They seemed unable or unwilling to go out beneath the streetlights outside the gate. After their unnerving experience, the children spent about an hour or so walking the streets. They talked a bit about what they'd just seen before returning to their homes. Some of these children told their parents, who of course dismissed the story as nonsense. The next day at school, though, their story fell on more receptive ears, and quickly the tale of their encounter spread among the other school children, creating quite the buzz of excitement. The school's headmaster caught wind of the story and decided to question the 3 children himself. Here's the strange thing. The headmaster of a primary school would probably be used to hearing wild stories from over imaginative children, but he came away with the impression that the children were telling the truth. Now, obviously, he didn't believe that they'd actually seen gnomes in the park, but he was certain that they'd seen something out there, and they weren't lying about it.
Yeah, look at this area.
He got the children to draw what they'd seen, and he taped his interviews with them. As far as I can tell, these recordings don't seem to be available online, but there are transcripts, and they make for intriguing reading. I'll put a link to the interviews in the description if you want to read through them yourself. They give some interesting details. The children had apparently seen these gnomes before, but only briefly during the summer holidays. They said that the gnomes had very wrinkly skin, and they appeared joyful and friendly, even though the children were scared of them. And they said that the little bubble cars made no sound as they moved, and they seemed to be able to jump over fallen trees and logs. I've got to say though, after reading through the transcripts a few times, I do have some questions. For a start, there are inconsistencies in their story. Now, you would expect some inconsistency. Memory is a malleable thing, and these are testimonies from 10-year-old children, so they're not the most consistent of witnesses to begin with. Plus, this encounter happened at around 8:30 p.m. in September in an unlit area of the park, so it would have been pretty dark in there. But even then, some of the differences in their testimonies are difficult to justify. Two of the children described the gnomes as having white beards with red at the tip, whilst the third child describes them as all having long black beards. This seems an odd detail to get wrong. You could say that this third witness simply didn't get as good a look at the gnomes as the other children did, but that same witness also described details that the other children didn't. For example, he said that their trousers were ripped and they had yellow patches on some of them, so he must have got a pretty good look at these gnomes. Perhaps in their panic they just missed certain details, and in their attempt to remember the events they filled the holes in their memory with whatever they imagined they'd seen. It could also be that if these really were some sort of otherworldly entity, that each child actually did see them slightly differently. As I've said in previous videos on these subjects, it could well be that there's some as yet unexplained phenomena that when we encounter it, our brains can't quite get a grasp of, and we sort of slot in whatever cultural reference we think might match it closely enough. This might explain why multiple witnesses seeing the same phenomena might see them slightly differently. It could also, of course, simply be that the children were lying. There are a lot of details between the interviews that match up, some of them perhaps a little bit too well. All three of the children interviewed said that there were around 30 cars, each carrying two gnomes. It seems an oddly specific number for all three of them to arrive at independently. I imagine you were being chased in the dark by a gang of gnomes in tiny cars. Would you have time to count them? Were there 20, 30, 50? I would expect to hear three different numbers unless the witnesses colluded before being interviewed. This doesn't necessarily mean that they invented the story. It could be after their experience they talked among themselves and came to the conclusion that there must have been about 30 cars in total, and they all agreed on this number. It would be good to be able to listen to the recordings and hear the kids' tone of voice as they're answering some of the questions. I think some of the nuance is lost when you're just reading text on a screen, but for the time being it seems that we only have the transcripts to go on. Rumours about the Wallerton Park gnome encounter spread quickly. Pretty soon newspapers were sending journalists to interview the kids. The Daily Mail article gives me another reason to be slightly suspicious of the story. Andrew, the child that fell into the swamp, when interviewed by the Mail, said, "I felt something drop on me out of the trees. I think it was one of the men and I fell into the swamp." It seems odd that he didn't mention this at all when questioned by the headmaster. It's a pretty big detail to leave out. After this initial excitement and the media frenzy, there doesn't seem to be much more information about the events. There are some modern-day researchers who have done good work piecing together the details about the Wallerton Park gnome encounter. Most notably Simon Young, who's published this excellent book, The Wallerton Gnomes, A Nottingham Fairy Mystery. I really enjoyed reading this. The children who saw the gnomes would be in their 50s now, and there have been efforts to track them down, but so far nobody seems to have come forward. Some people have taken this as a sign that they were lying and they're embarrassed to admit it. It could also be a sign that they're telling the truth and are embarrassed to admit it. I was reading this article on the Nottingham Hidden History blog by Frank E. Erb. He ends the article by saying that he put an appeal on a local Facebook group asking for help in tracking down any of the people involved in the Wallerton Park gnome encounter. One person replied saying, Patrick was one of the lads I knew in Radford. He was a few years younger than me. I worked with him in the mid-80s. I remember the story about the gnomes, so I asked him about it. He told me it was all Angela's, a friend of his, idea, and that they made it all up. Now, I've no idea if this person was telling the truth about Patrick's confession, and even if what he says is correct, how do we know that Patrick wasn't lying about making up the story? A story like that would bring a lot of ridicule on an adult. Perhaps as he grew older, he just found it easier to say that the story was fake. However, it isn't just those children that have seen strange things in Wallerton Park. There have been many more sightings, dating back decades before the 1979 encounter. Going back to the Frank Erb article, in it he tells a story that a friend told him. His friend said, My Aunt Alma was a very respectable lady who lived in a large house on the embankment. She was a very rational person who would politely laugh at any suggestion of the supernatural. However, she once recalled to us at a family gathering a memory about a trip she made to Wallerton Park as a child in the 1930s with her friend. They were enjoying a picnic by the lake when they noticed, in her words, little people no taller than a doll that cautiously appeared from out of the bushes. They were all dressed in fancy clothes. She claims to have watched them go across the lake on a tiny boat and disappear into the bushes on the other side. To be honest, we joked about it after she left, but it always struck me that she had no need to lie or make up such a story, as it was totally out of character for her. The article goes on to say how 20 years after his Aunt Alma told the story, some friends were visiting from Wales and they went for a day trip to Wallerton Park. When they got back, they said they'd seen some strange little people wearing fancy clothes. These little people were seen down by the lake and they vanished into the bushes when they noticed that they'd been spotted. The earliest encounter I can find comes from the book Seeing Fairies by Marjorie T. Johnson. She writes, Another account confirming the existence of these gnomes was given to me many years ago by Mrs. C. George of Stapleford, Nottingham. As long ago as the year 1900, she was passing Wallerton Park gates when she saw some little men dressed like policemen standing just inside the lodge entrance. They were smiling and looking very happy, she said. They hadn't any wings, and as far as I can remember, they were between 2 and 3 feet in height. And she also recalled that fairies had been seen dancing around the lake in the park. There are many more encounters, but I won't go through all of them in this video. I will put a link to the fairy census of 2014 to 2017. If you search Wallerton Park, you'll find a few interesting reports in there. There are more reports in the Wallerton Gnome book that are worth reading as well. So whether you believe in gnomes or not, it does seem that people have seen something weird in the park involving little people. I don't know whether that means that there's a gang of gnomes driving around in bubble cars in the swamps, but it's an interesting story nonetheless, and it's a legend that's existed in the park for well over 100 years. Hopefully one day one of the original children comes forward to give their side of the story. I know it's a long shot, but if any of them are listening to this, I'd love to hear from you whether the story is true or not. So let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you very much for watching. As always, a massive thank you to everyone who's supporting the channel. If you like strange stories about children encountering unusual creatures, hello everybody.
No more now.
Hang on. Just about to put a comment down. It's fucking hell.
Alright. You want to do it?
I'm gonna hit the hay after I put this comment down. I'm tired.
Alright. Do what I'm doing first, okay? Get loads of XP afterwards.
This is a goat man folklore or urban legend.
Don't know actually. Urban legend.
Okay.
I searched it up.
And where does the origin come from? What country and where? Do you know how you got Ratman of the South End? Where's the Goat Man from?
Prince George's County, Maryland, United States.
So, the Goat Man of Prince what?
Let me know when you've done it.
Prince George's County. I'm just gonna put down
Maryland, United States.
Goat Man of Maryland.
United States.
Well, the Goat Man of Maryland on here. Like research. go back to the Ratman video and I'll put the same comment down. Let's see if Shrouded Hand has any... Perfect. Looks like he has Instagram.
I look through my book collection and pick out a few unusual stories. You don't have to be falling asleep to enjoy this video, but if you are, then
What have I found? Can finally name my bird.
Anyway, we've got to get up in the morning.
Yeah. What time?
My mum's going to call me, so as soon as she calls me, I'm going to wake you up.
Alright, I'm just gonna top off this water. There we go. You know the hoe the iron hoe I gave you?
What about it?
Use it on the thing there. You get loads of XP.
I can stop. I've been doing that. What, on this?
Yeah. Just spam it on all of it. You get loads of XP with it. Like stuff over there, right? See a lot of them there.
Yes. Oh, bat falling under the water. Anyway, I'm going to save the game.
I'm just going to say this, but I find it funny when the bats just fly into the lava and kill themselves.